Well, hello there, and thank you very much for clicking on this video today. This particular issue, the issue of Israel and Gaza, um, can be difficult to talk about, not because of the issues involved. The issues, in fact, is very cut and dry. Israel is committing genocide on the Palestinians and wanting to create what they call a greater Israel by annexing Gaza and land from the Lebanon and Syria. That's painfully obvious. So it's not difficult in that sense. But after a while, when you've covered so many videos about it, you find yourself just repeating the same points over and over and over again. Like, how many more times can you say Israel's committing genocide, and so many governments in the West and other parts of the world just don't seem to care whatsoever? But this is a more interesting angle to kind of look at it, or a different angle anyway, maybe not more interesting. And this is about the many British Zionists that have served in Israel and are actively involved in the genocide that Israel is doing, and about British nationals' participation in it. So this is taken from three particular articles on Declassified UK, who do great work, and they've been following this story for quite some time. So that's where this is coming from. So we'll jump around a little bit. So we'll start with the first kind of entry. So this is coming from earlier this year, and you'll see where this kind of goes. So they say that more than 2,000 Britons served in the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, during the Gaza genocide. It can be revealed. So this information was obtained by Declassified UK via a Freedom of Information request issued to the IDF lawyer by Elad Man from the NGO Hatslachka, I think that's pronounced. The data outlines a number of people with dual and multiple nationalities who were IDF service members as of March 2025. So this is from as many people as we know about from this point of from March last year, essentially. It shows how 1,686 British Israelis and a further 383 people with British, Israeli, and another nationality served in IDF amid the annihilation and destruction of Gaza. They were among the 50,000 IDF soldiers with Israel and at least one other nationality. The largest cohorts came from the USA, which is no shock, Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany. Prior to this, data was only available on a number of Britons without Israeli citizenship serving in the IDF, so-called lone soldiers, and that figure was as low as 54. So this revelation that more UK passport holders served in IDF raises serious legal questions for British authorities, which have thus far, and we'll get onto this a bit later, failed to prosecute any citizens returning home from Gaza, despite the fact that their own testimony, what they've said, and a lot of data collected around them implicates a lot of British IDF volunteers have participating in war crimes. So Paul Heron, a lawyer in the Public Interest Law Centre, told the Declassified there must be no impunity where credible evidence links to British nationals to grave breaches of international law. The UK has clear duties to prevent genocide, which is the basic fucking standard. Preventing genocide should be like one of the basic standards of any government, and this government and successive governments have not even met that. And avoid assisting unlawful military action. Where dual nationals have served in units implicated in atrocities, the authorities must investigate promptly and, where evidence meets the threshold, pursue arrests and prosecutions like any other serious crime. So as it says here, Declassified contributor Hamza Yusuf previously exposed how Britons were serving in some of Israel's craziest combat units, where they viewed Palestinian fighters as rats and animals. So we'll jump into that particular article now because it gives a bit more content. So he outlines that these British soldiers have pledged to kill, I quote, kill these sons of whores and start pummeling them again. So Declassified has gathered names and photographs of 15 Britons who have recently fought in Israel, and this article was from a couple of years ago, and has partially identified another 10. There are among at least 80 UK nationals that we know of who the Foreign Office knows to have enlisted in the IDF, but has done nothing to stop. One of these soldiers, Master Sergeant Sam Sank, filmed himself fighting Gaza between December 2023 and January 2024. Declassified show showed the footage of an open-source intelligence analyst, Alisa Alexander, who located the neighborhood where it was taken. Her analysis, taken together with other videos geolocated by Bellingcat and testimony from the Palestinian community news page, give reasonable grounds for suspecting that Sank was in the Gaza border settlement of Kuza, while it was being flattened by the IDF during his 2-month tour. The top Israeli human rights group, B'Tselem, I believe that's pronounced, has described the IDF operation to create a buffer zone in the Kuza region of that period as a war crime. So they were participating in a war crime. So they said the military demolished the entire town, including residential buildings and mosque, B'Tselem said, warning that the level of destruction was disproportionate and violates the basic principle of international humanitarian law. Now, Sank filmed the neighborhood being demolished while his unit laughed and cheered. The footage strongly resembles other videos of demolitions in Kuza. Sank did not initially respond to requests for comment. Unsurprising. He later denied to Declassified having served in Kuza. So, one thing to bear in mind is that the footage taken by other soldiers, from what multiple sources suggests, is the same location as Sank's video. This shows vast controlled explosions occurred in that area and two or more other locations. In those videos traced by Bellingcat, soldiers smoked shisha, lit cigarettes, and posed for the camera during the demolitions. We've become addicted to explosions, a captain involved in the clearance wrote on Facebook. His post indicates the Operation Kuza was a punitive campaign designed to annex territory and destroy the village of, they quote, village of murderers. So we can see how these guys that have volunteered for IDF are just basically bragging about the destruction that they've done, the lives that they've killed, and the land that they're annexing and taking from the Palestinians. So one thing to say is that after leaving Gaza in late January, Sank told the Times of London, "I don't feel guilty about anything I did. There wasn't anything I did that was immoral," which, when you view another group of humans as beneath you and scum, is not entirely surprising. You know, when you're a racist and you don't feel bad about the things that you've done to that particular group of people. So one thing to mention about Sank is Sank scorned the 6-day ceasefire in November 2023, writing on his blog, "We can't trust these animals, and it's time to start pummeling them again." Describing his time in Gaza, he said that humanitarian aid was compromised and only extends the time that these rats can stay hidden underground. Although Sank claims not to have killed anyone, which I can't say I particularly believe. No, mate, not believing that one. He admitted, though, anyone caught in our sights was neutralised in what was effectively a death zone. So he outright said, "Oh yeah, anyone that we saw, we shot them, we murdered them, we killed them. Didn't matter who they were. Could be women, children, people in crutches, whoever. We just murdered them." Okay, psycho. So Sank, born and raised in Stanmore, northwest London, retweeted a post last month that he was involved in the genocide against Palestine. So, yeah, that's just an admission of guilt. Well, I would say he wouldn't see it as guilt, more an admission of pride, I think. So there's one thing to mention about him is that Sank moved to Israel in 2009, aged 18, and joined the paratrooper unit. As an IDF reservist, he was among the hundreds of dual nationality Britons that Israel called up to fight the Palestinians after the October 7th incident. And one thing to note here is that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson met Sank and 8 other British Israeli fighters in last November. So that would be in November 2023, I believe, at the Lone Soldier Centre in Jerusalem, where he praised them. Because if there's people doing terrible things, Boris Johnson is not far behind, it would seem. So while the rest of that group remain unidentified, social media posts by the Lone Soldier Centre shed light on further British migrants fighting for Israel. This April, its Instagram account celebrated a young woman from Manchester, Hani Volker, fulfilling her dream of joining the IDF. Yay, let's go out there and kill Palestinians. Woo! That's a dream for some people. The post claims she's a combat engineer instructor having emigrated to Israel last July. The term lone soldier refers to an IDF member without a family in Israel, often because they have volunteered from abroad. They include Daniel Menska, I believe that's pronounced, from England, who underwent grueling patrol training. Menska appeared on a TikTok in November 2023 wearing an IDF uniform and talking about his services in the Golani Brigade. One thing, let's see, another organizer. Yeah, sorry, I lost my place. There's a lot of information to kind of sift through. So one thing to bear in mind is that there are organizations that promote enlisting in the IDF, in case you're curious about how exactly are people, Jewish folk in the UK and other places, getting involved in this. So there's an organization that promotes foreign enlistment in the IDF, and it's called Garin Tazbar, I believe that's pronounced, which is partly funded by the Israeli government. The group, which has an office in Finchley, publicised the recruitment of Lunda Gabriel Knopf in a Facebook post almost 2 years ago. Knopf, who stood at the Jewish Free School in Harrow, told the Jewish Chronicle, "I moved to Israel with 5 words of Hebrew and I got an award for being an excellent soldier." He served in the Navy's Hornet Squadron on adrenaline-fueled patrols around Gaza, which implements Israel's illegal blockade. Israel has an illegal blockade around Palestine to starve them to death. That is what they are doing. This guy, who speaks with great pride and spoke to the Jewish Chronicle, curiously enough, well, not curiously enough, because the Jewish Chronicle is just Zionist and pro-Israel propaganda. That's what they do. Spoke with great pride of starving people, which is what this illegal blockade is doing. So Knopf left the IDF sometime in October, according to his LinkedIn account, making it unclear as whether he took part in the most recent assault on Gaza. So this March, so back in 2024, Garin Tazbar posted on Instagram about the drafting of another Londoner, believed to be Noam Shelley, into Israeli Special Forces unit Seriat Nahal. It said that he had proudly followed in his father's footsteps. Footage from Gaza shows the unit stripping Palestinian captives. So, British nationals should face consequences for their activities in Gaza. The IDF is enforcing a siege on Gaza, which is, as I've mentioned, severely limiting the supply of essential humanitarian aid to its civilian population. And the UN, I believe it was, I don't know if it's the current UN General Secretary, but at the time, the UN General Secretary, Antonio Guterres, warned that Gaza is becoming the graveyard of children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day. And we know the International Court has begun investigations into Israel for its conduct and for participating and exercising genocide. So we'll just jump to Paul Heron, who we talked about a little bit earlier in the Public Interest Law Centre. So this is what he had to say in this particular article from a couple of years ago, but it's still relevant to what we're talking about. He said, "What this report by Declassified UK clearly highlights is that units and battalions in the Israeli Defence Forces have been involved in war crimes, breaches of international humanitarian rights and international humanitarian law. It is disturbing to note that many British nationals have not only volunteered for the IDF, but have actively been serving in Gaza and are clearly suspected of being involved in combat operations that have led to war crimes being committed. This is not right. They cannot act with impunity. Any UK nationals credibly involved in war crimes in Gaza should be held to account and face prosecution. Alongside our partners, we will be looking closely at this report and other information with a view to take legal action." So there's more people that are implicated in this. So, as the article outlines, certain soldiers may find themselves of particular interest as prosecutors. This March, a video surfaced of Oren Anish wearing combat fatigues on the tape. The young IDF soldier said he was from England and had been in Gaza for 74 days. Anish unambiguously vowed to kill these sons of whores. His parents are originally from Cambridgeshire and appeared to have moved the family to Israel when he was a child. Other migrants in the IDF have already returned to Britain after fighting in Gaza last year. These include Levi Simon, whose Instagram posts were found by the Middle East Eye and showed him rummaging through the underwear drawers of Palestinian women forced to flee their homes. Well, terrific. In another post, Levi said that he was inside Gaza, waving an Israeli flag in one of those schools where they teach terrorism, so it's time to teach them something about Israel. Specifically, that Israel is a brutal state that murders people. That's what they've learned from about Israel. And one thing to note is that when he got back, Simon was invited to speak as a special star guest at a Jewish children's charity in London in January 2024, but pulled out amid protests when people asked, "What the fuck are you doing? Why is this person a special guest star at a children's charity? Are you fucking mad?" Anyway, another returning soldier that's faced some public scrutiny is Rabbi Zechariah Deutsch, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that, a chaplain at Leeds University. He left Yorkshire for Israel last autumn and served as a reservist in the IDF. One video shared on WhatsApp showed him dancing with other soldiers. Deutsch has since resumed his work at university, where lecturers complained that his presence on the campus is untenable. It must be a bit awkward. It's like, well, so that genocide that you were participating in, how was that? One thing which is particularly disturbing is that several Britons serving the IDF have received uncritical media coverage and even backing from senior politicians. So some of these politicians are former politicians because they were kind of sacked when Tories lost the elections, but they were relevant at the time. So one to bear in mind is Lord Wolfson of Tredegar, a former Conservative Justice Minister, who told Parliament last October that his son, believed to be Sam Wolfson, has now made his life in Israel and was serving with the IDF. A LinkedIn profile matches the description, states he left Haberdashers boys' school in London about 3 years ago, and right-wing press have gained access to other IDF members, giving them glowing reviews and favourable coverage. The Times spoke to a 30-year-old man from northwest London who asked only to be identified as Joe. The Chelsea season ticket holder is a reservist paratrooper that was deployed along the border with Lebanon. He's a veteran of Israeli bombardment in Gaza in 2014, which killed thousands of Palestinians. And the Daily Mail, of course, published a glowing profile of Tamara, a 20-year-old tank desert commander from Hedden, calling her the lioness of the desert. Tamara has been in the Israeli army for approximately 2 years and said the fighting in Gaza was a dream come true. A dream come true. Her words. She is part of an all-female Caracal battalion, which was reportedly called up for a special classified operation inside Gaza after the ceasefire had ended. So, there's a little bit more to this particular article, but I won't go into it because there's quite a lot more. So let's go back to kind of what we were talking about. So those are the some, not all. If you go to Declassified's website, you'll be able to find the full article and all the details that I didn't go into because some of it isn't entirely relevant to what we're talking about at the moment. So these were some of the Britons that were involved in serving in the Israeli armed forces. So the Metropolitan's War Crimes Unit was handed a complaint against 10 Britons serving in the IDF last year. Although their names were not made public, a 240-page dossier accused the British subjects of targeted killing of civilians and aid workers, including by sniper fire and indiscriminate attacks on civilian areas. It was submitted by the Public Interest Law Centre, which we talked about, and the Gaza-based Palestinian Centre for Human Rights. And what they have to say is this: British nationals are under no legal obligation to collude with crimes committed in Palestine. No one is above the law, said Michael Mansfield, one of the lawyers who issued the complaint. So Heron, one of the other lawyers involved, and we talked about a little bit before, said, in our report to the Metropolitan Police, we set out credible evidence that 10 British nationals served in the Israeli Defence Forces and were involved in war crimes and acts giving rise to genocide. He said our findings showed the issue is far deeper than we could ever have believed. And the Metropolitan Police did not respond when Declassified asked last year whether the people referred to by the PILC would be investigated for potential war crimes. Right, so we're moving on to what we call kind of lone soldiers, which we have talked about a little bit before. So In addition to dual nationals, there are over 50 what are called lone soldiers from Britain, defined as IDF members without family in Israel to support them, who have served in Israel amid the genocide. The data was released last year in a report on lone soldiers published by the Knesset Research and Information Center within Israel's parliament. Lone soldiers also include immigrants who arrived in Israel alone and volunteers from abroad. The Knesset report details that 54 Britons were among 3,000 lone soldiers serving in the IDF in August 2024. 33 of those Britons joined through what we've talked about before, the TASBAR program. In the past, the UK government has itself offered support to lone soldiers of Israel, so the British government is complicit in this. And we'll go into a bit more detail. So, Chaim Schreiler, I believe that's pronounced, originally from Manchester, served in Netza Yuda, an Israeli military unit which the US considered sanctioning in 2024 over evidence of gross human rights violations. So, what they were doing has to be pretty fucked up for even the US to consider sanctioning them. So Schreier was invited onto a British Royal Naval ship in 2021 alongside other British lone soldiers who joined the IDF without family in Israel to support them. He was pictured walking onto HMS Richmond wearing his uniform before being given a tour of the boat and meeting Britain's defence attaché in Israel, Colonel Jim Priest. Shire is among at least 3 Brits identified by Declassified using open source data and facial recognition software who served with Netza Yuda over recent years. And in the actual article itself, it provides you with a very handy photo of the literal image. And so, there are obviously legal concerns. So, in July 2024, the International Court of Justice handed down its advisory opinion on the legal consequences of Israel's occupation of Palestine. The court advised all UN member states, which includes the United Kingdom, that they are obligated to refrain from assisting Israel in maintaining its occupation. In January 2024, the ICJ also put all member states on notice of serious risk that genocide was being committed by Israel in Gaza. The duty to prevent genocide was triggered due to the actual or constructive knowledge of the immediate plausibility that genocide was or was about to be committed, the UN Commission of Inquiry subsequently wrote. To this end, the UK government's failure to currently investigate or even really monitor the Britons serving the IDF can be interpreted or could be interpreted as tacit support of Israel's military campaign. And Britain's recent recognition of a Palestinian state might also mean that British nationals serving the IDF could be breaching the Foreign Enlistment Act, which is an obscure piece of legislation which I had no clue about. But this law, passed in 1870, makes it an offence for Britons to fight for a foreign state at war with another state which the UK is at peace. A spokesperson for the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians said, "No one in the UK wants to live next door to a potential war criminal, and yet British people who fought for the IDF are allowed to return to this country and live freely among us, consequence-free, despite fighting for an army that is committing genocide. It is utterly inexcusable that the UK government is failing to take action to hold citizens accountable for potential violations under domestic law." So, one thing to add to this, and I was going to add a little bit more, is that this big dossier that we talked about was handed over to Metropolitan Police, and they refused to do anything about it. They turned it away and said, nope, not going to do anything. However, since then, the Metropolitan Police has reopened war crimes cases on Britain's fighting for Israel. So this is the most recent up-to-date information about that, which we're going to go through, which again comes from Declassified UK. So, the Metropolitan Police Service has reversed its decision to close a war crimes probe into UK nationals who fought for Israel amid the Gaza genocide. It can now be revealed. The 240-page referral was submitted by the Public Interest Law Centre and the Palestinian Centre for Human Rights. This was in August of 2025, as we discussed. It alleged that 10 UK nationals, including dual citizens, had committed war crimes and crimes against humanity while fighting for Israeli Defence Forces in Gaza. Allegations against those soldiers included international crimes such as willful killing, extermination, attacking civilians, and deportation or forcible transfer of population. Now, the Met initially responded by narrowing its focus to 4 identifiable British nationals before informing the claimants in April 2026 that it would not pursue any criminal investigation whatsoever. It said that an effective investigation could not be conducted, nor was there a realistic prospect of convictions. But in correspondence last week, the Met announced a reversal of its position and said a fresh scoping exercise in relation to 4 UK nationals will now take place. Scoping exercises are undertaken by the Met's War Crimes Team, which is housed within Counter-Terrorism Command. This is to decide whether it can conduct a full investigation. The move comes after the British Palestinian human rights campaigner Lubna Spetian, who is represented by PILC, threatened judicial review proceedings against the Met. So it would appear that the Met basically changed its mind once someone started to say, well, we'll get a judicial review to look into your negligence, your gross incompetence, and your utter unwillingness to look into this. And then said, okay, we'll maybe do something. So in the pre-action letter, the PILC said the Met had wrongly applied its own policy and failed to take into account relevant considerations, such as the full range of evidential pathways available for investigation. Human rights lawyer Michael Mansfield KC, who supported the initial referral, said allegations of war crimes must be investigated, irrespective of the nationality of those accused or the political sensitivities surrounding the conflict. The Metropolitan's decision to revisit its earlier conclusion is therefore welcomed. It provides an opportunity for a fresh and independent assessment based on all available evidence. That is precisely what justice requires. And so, one thing to bear in mind is that over 26,000 people recently signed a letter calling for the UK government to track the movements of Britons who had served in the IDF and conduct an independent war crimes investigation. So there was genuine pressure and genuine public outrage at this. That letter was signed by over 70 prominent figures, including the Green Party leader Zach Delansky, genocide scholar Martin Shaw, and anti-apartheid politician Andrew Feinstein. Last month, UN human rights lawyer and expert Chris Sidoti declared anyone who has served in the IDF in Gaza since October 2023 must be considered a suspect for the commission of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes of genocide. In its correspondence with the PILC earlier this month, the Met's War Crimes Team noted that many international bodies involved in international human rights law are of the view that actions occurring in Gaza could amount to war crimes. I think could amount is a bit unfair. I think do amount is actually what most of these organisations are saying. So the PILC and the PCHR have now invited the SO15 to participate in the joint evidence development process aimed at identifying further witnesses, additional evidence, expert material, and other investigative opportunities capable of assisting further assessment. Groups noted how potential lines of investigation might include inquiries with the UK Intelligence Services, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, or the RAF for surveillance imagery. So Paul Heron, who we've referenced quite a bit, adds to this, finally saying, we welcome the Metropolitan Police's withdrawal of its previous decision and to undertake a fresh scoping exercise. This is an important and responsible step to recognise that the early decision should no longer stand. These allegations concern some of the gravest crimes known to international law. Where there are identifiable British nationals to have participated in such crimes, it is essential that investigative decisions are taken on the fullest evidential basis possible. So, that's all of the information that we kind of currently have about this. That's kind of what we've gone through. And I see, sadly, people being very flippant and dismissive of international law. We have international law so that things like World War II kind of don't happen again, or at the very least that we don't get wars quite like that. Now, obviously, that vision has kind of failed, not just in Gaza, but there's genocides going on in Africa as well, in places like the Sudan and various other civil wars across the world where genocide, mass murder, and deliberate murder of civilians is happening. But just because it's happening, that's no reason just to give up and throw your hands up and say, oh well, because this is difficult to enforce and can be difficult to prosecute sometimes, ergo, we give up and do fuck all. And I don't care who's doing it, whether they're British people, whether they're French, whether they're from the moon, whether they're Muslim, Jewish, Christian, whether they worship a giant deck of bread. I don't care who people are. If people are accused of war crimes and there is credible evidence that they have done said war crimes, they should be investigated for it and they should be fucking punished, because war crimes are one of the worst things that a human being can fucking do. End of story. And these British guys who volunteered to go over to the IDF, they were not forced. There was no threat of imprisonment. There was no draft. They were either enthusiastic or, I don't know, convinced to do it. They are responsible for their own decisions and their own decision makings. They shouldn't be there, and they've made the choice to be there, and that's an important thing to bear in mind. So I have no sympathy for these people whatsoever, considering what they have done, whether it be the law potentially pursuing them or the fucked up realities of them bearing the guilt of what they've done. Like, yeah, you should bear guilt for what you've done because you have participated in mass murder and genocide. You should feel bad about it. And hopefully, I mean, it's the Metropolitan Police, so you can always rely on them to fuck up, but hopefully, for some of these bastards, the law might catch up with them and they could be facing a court. We'll see. Hopefully, we'll get there. And if we do get there, Declassified UK, I'm sure, will talk about it, and I will talk about it as well. So I hope you enjoyed this particular rather grim video today, but I felt it was an important topic to talk about, since I hadn't seen it talked about that much outside kind of smaller media sources. But anyway, thank you for joining me on this video today, and I hope to catch you in the next video, so have a good day whether you are. So, bye-bye.